Hey, it's Brad, and in the past few hours, essentially the past day, there's been a couple exciting, but definitely interesting stories in space that we're going to talk about. Now, first, NASA has started rolling out the Space Launch System. Now, the Space Launch System is the biggest, most powerful rocket NASA's ever built. Yes, it will be more powerful than the Saturn V that took people to the moon on the Apollo missions back in the 60s and early 70s. Now, the Space Launch System is going to be launching the Artemis mission. Artemis is NASA's return to the moon. The whole goal here is to return humans to the moon, and not just return them to the moon, but have them stay on the moon in the future. Now, in Greek mythology, Artemis is the sister of Apollo and the goddess of the moon, so a very fitting choice to launch humans back to it. And the way these astronauts are going to get to the moon is on the Space Launch System. So this rocket and capsule, called the Orion capsule, has been built over the past decade and is getting ready to eventually take off to the moon. Artemis 1, what is the first mission, is aiming for about May for a takeoff. But in order for all this to happen, they've been testing, they've been putting all the bits together in this giant hangar in Florida. And now that's all done, they're beginning the process of rolling it out to the launch pad. You don't build these rockets on the launch pad. In fact, the launch pad is used by other rockets. It's like an airport gate. You don't park the plane at the airport gate. Other planes would use it as well. You take it to the hangar for maintenance or operation, and that's what they've been doing with this rocket. So it's beginning the slow process of moving this huge thing out to the launch pad, and when it reaches the launch pad, they'll do a number of last tests to make sure both the rocket and capsule is performing and it's working for the tower and the launch pad, getting ready for the eventual launch in May. So it's a really exciting thing. We've been waiting, and people have been asking, when are we getting back to the moon? How long is it? Well, we're not that far away from seeing the first rocket going back to the moon, hopefully as quickly as May. The aim is to put humans on Artemis 2 next year or into 2024, landing humans on Artemis 3 in 2025. And it all begins with this working today. So it's going to be exciting to see how the Space Launch System develops over the next few months to years. But in other news, we've also had some interesting issues related to Russia and cooperation with the US and Europe in space. Now, we talked about this last week, that due to the terrible situation unfolding in Ukraine related to sanctions and the political tensions that we're seeing here on Earth between the US and Europe and Russia, it's starting to affect operations in space. And just yesterday, the European Space Agency, so this is the group that has lots of members across Europe who are participating in joint missions. Now, Europe and Russia have been building what's called ExoMars. Now, this was designed to be a mission going to Mars that had lots of different parts. There was an orbiter. There was a rover called Rosalind Franklin. Rosalind Franklin is the discoverer of DNA, actually. So a very fitting message and name for this rover because it's going to be looking for signs of life on Mars. Now, this project, as I said, was built between ESA, the European Space Agency, and Roscosmos, the Russian Space Agency. But given the tensions and issues, and again, the situation unfolding in Ukraine, Europe has ceased working with Russia. Now, what this practically means is essentially now ExoMars is on indefinite suspension or delay. There is no plans as of now to launch this mission anymore. Now, this has some big ramifications. One, in order to launch to Mars, you need to wait for Earth and Mars to be around the same side as the sun. We go around different speeds, our years are different. So in order for it to be the quickest trip possible, about 6 months, you need to wait every 25 to 26 months for when Earth and Mars are essentially near each other on the same side of the sun. Now, this last happened in July 2020, and we saw NASA launch their rover, China launch their rover, and the UAE launch a mission as well. Well, in fact, ExoMars was scheduled to be launched in that window as well, but due to COVID lockdowns and issues, they missed the final preparations and it missed that launch window. So it was shoved back to September 2022, the next launch window. But now with this indefinite suspension, ESA announcing, because what they're essentially saying is, we want to do this mission, we are not going to do it with Russia. So they have to find a way of replacing the bits and parts that Russia built, and also a new way to launch it. It was going to go via Russian cooperation, launching to Mars. So they have to redo all that work. Now, that clearly will not happen by September, meaning it is now pushed back to at least the next launch window. Now, the next launch window is the end of 2024, maybe early 2025. So it's now gone at least a 5-year delay, but they still have to rebuild, rework, redesign instruments. So it may not even reach that 2024-2025 window, then being pushed into probably closer to 2027. So, this mission may end up being delayed almost a decade due to both COVID and now the terrible unfolding crisis and war in Ukraine. But also related to this, we've seen tensions between the Russian space agency Roscosmos and NASA and other groups. Now, they have a long history of working together. They do joint missions on the International Space Station. And just a few hours ago, the latest batch of Russian cosmonauts, there was 3, arrived at the International Space Station. So generally, there's groups that go from the Russian Soyuz capsule. There's always at least 2 cosmonauts. Sometimes there's an American astronaut. In fact, later this month, there will be 2 cosmonauts and an American astronaut coming back down on a Soyuz capsule, being essentially rotated off. What is interesting, though, as pointed out first by Scott Kelly, one of the former NASA astronauts, up until recently the longest American spaceflight record holder, so spending the longest time in space, noted that the suits these Russian cosmonauts were wearing were very different. Generally, they wear a blue suit. Sometimes they have a white one. They appear to arrive in a very yellow suit. Now, given the current problems and issues happening in Ukraine and the national colors, there's a lot of wondering about whether this was a deliberate act. Are these Russian cosmonauts trying to send a message that, yes, let's regain this way of cooperation in space for peace? In fact, it has been noted at least one of the cosmonauts was originally born in Latvia and is part of the Russian space agency. So a very big signal that maybe we can find a way of easing tensions on Earth, finding that peace through space cooperation, something that's been happening for decades. It's been this great way of diplomacy by going far away from the Earth to reflecting back on our own issues. So there's a lot of people hopeful that maybe this is a sign they're trying to reach out, maybe this is a statement, or maybe people are just looking into it too much. But it definitely is a unique choice, and a suit that they often don't wear. In fact, most people noted that at least in the past 5 years, they have not chosen this yellow suit, and we all clearly know what's happening now. So clearly seems to be some sort of message being sent. So definitely an area to watch forward to. So lots happening in just the past 24 hours. Stay tuned to the YouTube channel. You can like, subscribe it, follow on Facebook, Dr. Brad Tucker, for more stories.